The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I nearly stepped on it as I left for work. A single envelope, yellowed with age, with no stamp or return address. Just my name in faded typewriter ink, Daniel Carter. Inside, a single sheet of paper, brittle, at the edges. You've inherited the property at Blackpine Ridge. Come see it before the winter. No signature, no explanation. My hands shook as I turned the page over, searching for some clue, but the back was blank. The paper smelled faintly, of damp earth and something else, something sharp like old copper. Uncle Elias had been dead to our family long before he actually died. The last time I'd seen him, I was maybe 10 years old. He'd shown up at our doorstep in the middle of the night, wild-eyed, his beard matted, his clothes reeking of wood smoke and sweat. He'd grabbed my father's shoulders and whispered, something that made Dad's face go pale. "They know where I live now." The next morning, Elias was gone. No note, no goodbye. Just an empty guest room and a lingering unease that hung over our house for weeks. 20 years later, and now this. I called my father first. "Dad, did Elias ever mention a cabin?" A long silence. Then carefully, "Where did you hear that name?" "The lawyer just called. Apparently Elias left me property in his will." Another pause. I could hear Dad's breathing slow, like he was steadying himself. "Daniel, don't go up there." "Why not?" "Because that place—" He cut himself off. "Just forget about it. Let the lawyers handle it. Sell it, burn it, I don't care, but don't go there." He hung up before I could argue. The lawyer's office was no help either. A bored receptionist handed me a thick envelope filled with deeds and surveys, all stamped with Elias's spidery signature. "The property's been in probate for years," she said, chewing gum loudly. "No one even knew he had a will until we found it stuffed in a safety deposit box last month." I flipped through the papers. Maps of Blackpine Ridge, a crumbling topographical survey, and a single handwritten note. "If you're reading this, they let you live. Don't waste it." That night, I dreamed of the cabin. Not as it was now, rotting and abandoned, but as it must have been decades ago. Smoke curling from the chimney, lantern light flickering in the windows, and beyond the tree line, shadows that moved when the wind didn't. I woke up sweating, my heart pounding. 3 days later, I packed my Jeep and headed north. I told myself it was just curiosity, that I'd take a quick look, snap some photos, and leave before dark. But even then, as the city faded behind me and the trees swallowed the road, I knew I wasn't coming back. The highway north slowly dissolved into county roads, then into gravel paths barely wide enough for my Jeep. The trees grew taller, their branches knitting together overhead like skeletal fingers. My GPS had lost signal an hour back, leaving me to navigate by the faded paper map I'd picked up at the last gas station, the one with Blackpine Ridge circled in shaky red ink. The town of Mills End was my last stop for supplies. What passed for a general store was really just a converted barn, its shelves half empty. The old man behind the counter didn't even look up when the bell jingled. "Fill her up regular?" he asked, still reading his newspaper. "Actually, just directions," I said, unfolding the map, looking for Blackpine Ridge. The newspaper crinkled as his hands froze. When he finally looked up, his watery eyes were wide. "Ain't nobody goes up there since your uncle stopped coming to town." I felt my pulse quicken. "You knew Elias Carter?" "Knew him. Whole town knew him." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Started coming in weekly back in the 80s, then monthly, then not at all. Sheriff went up there after 6 months of no sightings." He swallowed hard. "Found the cabin empty, food still on the table, fire still warm, but no Elias." I bought extra batteries and 3 more flashlights. The road deteriorated quickly after Mills End. What started as packed gravel became a dirt track, then just 2 ruts in the undergrowth. Branches scraped against the jeep's sides like fingernails. The forest grew denser, the pines so close together their trunks formed a solid wall in places. Then I saw the sign, not an official one, just a piece of plywood nailed to a tree. The words Black Pine Ridge, painted in fading letters. Below, someone had added in red, "Turn back." The last gas station appeared like a mirage, a single pump and a cinder-block building with "Last Chance" spray-painted above the door. The attendant was a heavy-set man in oil-stained overalls who watched me approach with undisguised suspicion. "You lost, city boy?" I showed him the map. "Just heading up to Black Pine Ridge." His face went slack. "Ain't been nobody up that way since the 90s. He wiped his hands on a rag that looked dirtier than his hands. "Place got a reputation." "For what?" He leaned, in close enough that I could smell tobacco and motor oil, "for making folks disappear. First it was hikers in the 70s, then a survey crew in 83. After your uncle vanished," he shook his head, "sheriff stopped sending people up there." I laughed nervously. "Ghost stories." He didn't smile. "Only ghost up there is whatever took. Your uncle. The last mile was barely a road at all. The jeep lurched over roots as thick as my arms, the suspension groaning in protest. Through the trees, I caught glimpses of something dark looming ahead. Then the forest opened up. The cabin sat in a clearing that felt more like a wound in the earth than a natural space. Not the quaint hunting lodge I'd imagined, but a slumped, rotting thing. The roof sagged like a broken spine, its shingles curled like dead leaves. The windows were boarded up with planks that looked chewed at the edges, but it was the door that stopped me cold. Carved deep into the weathered wood, the letters, uneven but deliberate, was a message. "They watch from the trees." As I stepped closer, my boot crunched on something. Glass. I knelt down and brushed away the pine needles to reveal dozens of tiny mirrors, all broken, arranged in a semicircle around the cabin's perimeter. That's when I heard it, the faintest rustle from the tree line, not the wind. Something moving against it, something watching. I should have left. The thought screamed in my head as I stood before that sagging doorway, my pulse pounding in my ears. Every instinct told me to turn around, to get back in the jeep and never look back. But something deeper, some stubborn mix of pride and stupid curiosity, rooted me to the spot. The door resisted at first. Years of rain and neglect had swollen the wood in its frame. I braced myself and kicked near the lock, the impact sending a jolt up my leg. On the third try, with a splintering crack that echoed through the empty clearing, it gave way. A wave of stale air rushed out, the scent of mildew and old smoke, with something underneath it I couldn't name, something faintly metallic like dried blood. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating swirling dust motes dancing in the air. The cabin was a time capsule. A military-style cot stood against one wall, its thin mattress stained with yellowed circles. In the corner, a cast-iron wood stove sat cold, its pipe rising through the roof. But it was the desk that drew my attention, a massive oak monstrosity covered in papers, its surface scarred with deep gouges that looked disturbingly like claw marks. I approached slowly, my boots leaving prints in decades of accumulated dust. The papers were maps mostly, hand-drawn with obsessive detail, marking trails and clearings throughout Black Pine Ridge. Some areas were circled repeatedly until the pencil had torn through the paper. Others had big X's over them, accompanied by notes in shaky handwriting. "Don't go here after dark. They gather here. The door is here." Beneath the maps were dozens of journal pages filled with the same phrase, over and over. "They're getting closer." The handwriting deteriorated as I flipped through them, the letters becoming jagged. The pressure so intense it had torn through pages in places. The most recent entries were just that single phrase, sometimes covering entire pages. The letters, overlapping until they became unreadable. As I stood there, the last light of day faded from the boarded-up windows. The temperature dropped suddenly, my breath fogging in the air despite it being early fall. I lit the old kerosene lantern I'd found on the desk, its flickering flame casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to move independently across the walls. That's when I heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. 3 deliberate rasps against the front door, not the random scrabbling of an animal, but something with purpose. Something that knew how to knock. My blood turned to ice. Then came the voice. A wet, gurgling whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Elias. It wasn't human. Couldn't be. The way it stretched the syllables, the way it clicked, and popped between words like something learning to speak without proper vocal cords. The scratching moved to the nearest window, slow and methodical, tracing the edges of the boards. I could hear breathing now, ragged and wet, with a faint whistling sound like air moving through a punctured lung. I backed toward the cot, my hands shaking so badly the lantern light danced wildly across the walls. The scratching continued, at each window in turn, making a slow circuit of the cabin. Occasionally it would stop, and I'd hear that awful wet sniffing at the cracks in the wood. At some point, I must have sat on the cot, though I don't remember doing so. I know I didn't sleep, couldn't have, not with that thing outside making its rounds, but the night passed in strange fragments, moments of terrifying clarity between stretches of numb detachment. The lantern burned low as dawn approached. With the first grey light filtering through the cracks in the boards, the sounds finally stopped. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty as I sat there in the growing light. Whatever had been outside hadn't left. It was just waiting for dark again. Morning brought no comfort. The cabin's walls were etched with markings, tally counts, hundreds of them, clustered around the windows and doors, like something had been counting the days until it could get in. I spent the daylight hours searching for answers. Beneath the floorboards, I found Elias's journal. The last entry was dated the day he vanished. They've learned how to knock. As dusk crept in, I built up the fire. That's when I saw them. Figures standing at the tree line, tall, thin, heads tilted at impossible angles, watching, waiting. The lantern light didn't touch them. The journal told the story. 30 years ago, Elias had dug up something in the woods. Something old. At first it was just noises at night, then footprints circling the cabin, then voices mimicking his dead wife. The final pages were frantic. They don't want the land. They want the door. I sealed it, but they're learning. Crash from the porch. The door shuddered, not from a knock, from the inside. I ran for the jeep. The figures didn't chase. They herded. Every turn led me deeper into the woods, the trees pressing closer, their branches snagging my clothes like bony fingers. Then, the clearing. A slab of stone, etched with symbols that made my eyes hurt. And on it, Elias's rotting corpse, his mouth stretched wide in a scream. Behind me, the whispers rose to a chorus. You're late. Epilogue. The police found the jeep abandoned at the trailhead. They never found me. But sometimes, when hikers pass near Black Pine Ridge, they hear something strange. A voice, faint but clear, whispering from the trees. They're getting closer.